Do you have any sevens?
You haters, you critics, you Shakur haters, you crickets, you haters. All of y'all kept crapping on Shakur Stevenson, saying that Shakur Stevenson looked like this, that, and the other. He's a runner, he's a track star. All he know how to do is run like the Flash. Guess what, y'all? Shakur showed a lot of offense this fight. Yes, y'all, we're talking about Shakur Stevenson versus Artem Harutyunyan. Yes, we just coming off this fight. Shakur did take the fight via unanimous decision. Now, I will say this, make it quick and short and briefly. Shakur had a lot of moments in that fight where he could have stopped Artem Harutyunyan. It was a very dominant performance for Shakur. And what a lot of people fail to realize is that with Shakur Stevenson is that he's a defensive breakdown fighter. He's not a one punch knockout fighter like Tank Davis. A lot of y'all need to stop giving him criticism for not knocking everybody out. Y'all doing that with Jao Pataya. Stop thinking these guys are going to knock out everybody. Now look, I did say Shakur was going to stop him, and I was wrong. But at the same time, though, I'm not gonna get mad at Shakur because Shakur is not gonna stop everybody. But it was very much a dominant performance. Um, I gave Artem first round, the 10th round, 11th round. Other than that, it was a clear performance of a masterclass from Shakur Stevenson. And yeah, very dominant performance. I got it wrong. Mario hit it right on the dot with the prediction. Speaking of Mario, let me turn it over to him.
Had it probably 11 rounds to one Shakur. I had Artem Harutyunyan winning the first round, and then after that, I think it was just all Shakur. See, first of all, before we get into Shakur Stevenson, top rank, don't think we forgot about Oshaki Foster. Don't think we forgot about that huge robbery there. And because of that, Oshaki Foster is no longer WBC champion. That was some diabolical work right there. And I'm going to be honest, whoever was judging that fight needs to be investigated because you cannot tell me that there was not bets placed on that fight. I'm sorry, but that was just a disgrace to boxing in itself. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about Shakur Stevenson. I'm gonna say this right now. A lot of people are so short-term memoried. Like they just remember the De Los Santos fight and they just assume that's what Shakur Stevenson is. Now, I'm not gonna lie. After this fight, I do have some questions. However, y'all cannot be talking about how Shakur Stevenson is a runner, he a track star. Because I'm telling you this right now, all we saw from Shakur Stevenson was just brutal offense. And it took him probably around 3 or 4 rounds to figure out Artem Harutyunyan, but he figured him out. And when he figured him out, it looked like Artem Harutyunyan was in survival mode. And Breezy's right. You can't keep expecting all of these guys to knock them out. You can't expect them to do that because that's not the way boxing gets. Some guys are knockout artists, other guys are. And it seems like we're in a day and age where if you're not a knockout artist, you're not a fan favorite. Well, I got news for you guys. Do you guys remember a guy named Pernell Whitaker? He wasn't a knockout artist either, yet everybody loved him. So let's get this whole narrative about you need to knock guys out in order to be that type of guy. Now, if that's your type of fighter that you like, cool. By all means, stick with that guy. If y'all like Tank because he knocks people out, cool. By all means, stick with him. I like Tank too. Don't get me wrong. I think Tank's a great fighter. But you also got to realize that not every single lightweight in this division is going to be like Tank. That's what you have to understand. And I think people just keep on forgetting that. Now, before we get into ranking the fight and rating it, I will say that Shakur Stevenson, he did a really good job. Once he figured out Artem Harutyunyan, he talked about how he was going to aim for Artem Harutyunyan's body and how he was going to knock him out that way. And I'm not going to lie, Breezy, you almost hit it right in the money. That sixth, seventh round, around that time, it looked like Shakur Stevenson was going to knock him out. But it seemed like Shakur Stevenson kind of slowed down a little bit. It seemed like he kind of was being a little bit too patient. And what I like to see out of Shakur Stevenson, I'm trying to see that killer mentality. I want to see him just say F it for a round and go in there and try to knock the guy out. And his grandfather was in his corner telling him, like, you need to knock this guy out. Go in there and kick his ass. And Shakur Stevenson wasn't listening. They were arguing in the corner. That right there is a big red flag because regardless of what you think you know as a fighter, Your trainer is there for a reason. He is your trainer for a reason, and you have to listen to him. We've seen the same things with Tank Davis when he was fighting Mario Barrios. We've seen the same thing when Floyd Mayweather told him he was losing the fight. He wanted to keep arguing about it. Stop arguing about it. Go in there and fight. And one guy I give a lot of credit to is Terrence Crawford. When he was fighting Sean Porter and they told him he was losing the fight, he didn't argue about it. He just said, you know what? Okay, bet. And he turned that switch on. That's what Shakur Stevenson needs to start doing. What I liked about Shakur Stevenson as well is he didn't stick to just one part of the body. Artem Harutyunyan, he maybe got like maybe a few punches in, but other than that, it was the Shakur Stevenson show. He showed his counterpunching ability, he showed his defense on display, and what I really do love about Shakur Stevenson, a little fun fact, in the last two fights, in the last 24 rounds, I don't think him nor Edwin de Los Santos have landed double-digit punches on Shakur Stevenson. That is proof that what we talked about in the prediction episode, he's the best defensive fighter in the game. That is proof of it. In 24 rounds, not a single fighter has landed 10 punches on him. And that right there is something that we got to take into effect. What I felt like Artem Harutyunyan could have did a lot better. We talked about how he needed to have high volume punching, how he needed to back up Shakur Stevenson. We saw it in the first round. We saw it in the first round. It looked like he was backing him up in the first and second round. However, it felt like Artem Harutyunyan started playing Shakur Stevenson's game, trying to find counter punches, trying to find the right times to maybe get two or three punches in. And I feel like with a guy like Shakur Stevenson, you got to push him back. You got to bring the pressure towards him, and you got to bring the fight towards him. And I feel like Artem Harutyunyan didn't do that. I feel like once he got hurt by Shakur Stevenson, he just played survival mode and he didn't try to attack or fight. Now, I will say shout out to Artem Harutyunyan for taking his loss like a man. Shout out to him for having good spirits after the loss, for not allowing Mark Kriegel to kind of get into his head, or whoever the interviewer was, I should say. They were saying some like pretty disrespectful stuff. They're like, well, by the looks of your face, it doesn't look like you had a good time. Come on, the guy just lost. What is that? Like, I'm just saying top rank. You guys really were bottom rank today, and you guys got to do better. But with that being said, let's go to strategy. The ranking from a scale of 1 to 10 from both fighters and overall combined like average, what would you give the strategy of this fight?
I give it a 8. Artem Harutyunyan, he went to the body, which is one of the things that, you touched on. Shakur leaving that body open. So he was trying to touch to that body. He was trying to mix it up. He wasn't trying to make it too obvious. He was trying to go to the body. On Shakur's part, Shakur, he used his defense, but not only that too, but he also showed the haters too that he's not a runner, he's not a track star, and that he can hang in the pocket, and that he can use his counterpunching ability in the pocket, even with somebody as aggressive and effective like Artem Harutyunyan. So if you ask me, my personal opinion, I give it an 8. As far as Shakur Stevenson's IQ, defensive and offensive responses, and Artem Harutyunyan's pressure and willingness to attack the body in situations where Shakur Stevenson was open.
Felt like Artem Harutyunyan did good for like the first 3 rounds, and then after that kind of slacked off. I felt like high volume could have been a little bit better, but like we talked about, the one weakness that you were going to target, which of course Stevenson, was that body, and there were times where he was hitting that body. I felt like if he just continued to try to attack that body instead of just trying to stay in survival mode, I feel like he maybe would have had a little bit more success. I'm not saying he would have won the fight, but he would have had a little bit more success. As far as Shakur Stevenson, I mean, I got to give him an 8. You know what I'm saying? But overall, I'm going to give the overall fight strategy, I'm going to give it probably about, I'll give it a 7.5. I'll say that. I'll give it a 7.5. I feel like with Shakur Stevenson, he did everything that we expected him to do. Defensively, he came in and he showed out, and we knew whether it was going to be a knockout or a decision, that it was going to be complete dominance from Shakur Stevenson. We said that. I said I didn't expect it to be anywhere more than 9-3 Shakur Stevenson. You said possibly 11-1. It seems like we kind of had this fight reversed. You had my prediction, I had yours as far as the decision predictions, which was pretty funny and ironic. Seems like they were kind of reversed. But overall, I don't think we were that far off the mark. You know what I'm saying? Shakur Stevenson, he went in there and he did what he was supposed to do. The only reason why I don't give Shakur Stevenson a higher grade is because I feel like towards the end, he kind of slacked off a little bit, kind of started slowing down, where I felt like he could have applied more pressure and got Artem Harutyunyan out of there in the 8th round, in the 9th round, but it just seemed like he kind of slowed down. So overall, if you compare the 7.5 and in the 8. That's around 7.75. So that will be the grade 4 strategy overall. Now, let's get to the excitement of this fight. Breezy, was it a snooze fest like Edwin De Los Santos? Scale of 1 to 10. How exciting was this fight to you?
I won't say that it was exciting, but at the same time, I'm not gonna say it was boring. Shakur Stevenson versus Edwin, boring. This fight was kind of like it was kind of like in the mid. It was kind of like right in the middle. It wasn't boring, but it wasn't exciting. But it was enough for you to remember who Shakur Stevenson is. And for all the people saying that, oh, this is just as bad as Edwin De La Sonia, y'all just must be haters because this was nothing like the Edwin De Los Santos fight. He didn't do any of this in the De Santos fight. So if you're even trying to make that comparison, something has to be generally wrong with you because I didn't see any signs of the Edwin De Los Santos fight in this. He was more now. Could he been a little bit more aggressive? Yes, and then with that he could have got the stoppage, but he definitely used more offense in this fight than he did with the De Los Santos fight. So for people to try there try to make that comparison is honestly nasty work to me, and it's honestly unbelievable. He really showcased in the pocket because we know if Shakur really wanted to, he could have just stayed on the outside the whole night, and y'all would have still went on Twitter and said something about it. But he stayed in the pocket. But he used his IQ. But he used his defense. So, to me, I it wasn't exciting, but it wasn't boring. I give it about 7.
Give it a 6.5. It wasn't as boring as Edwin De Los Santos fight, but I will say this. In the beginning, towards around like the third round, between the third and like the sixth or seventh round, I felt like it was very exciting, and then it just kind of slowed down from there. And I felt like it would have been more of an exciting fight if Artem brought a little bit more fight. And that's the reason why I got to give it a 6.5 is because all the action we saw it out of one guy. And I feel like when you have a boxing fight where it's one guy dominating the fight, I don't think that's what you call an exciting fight. To me, an exciting fight is a back and forth, is a back and forth fight between two guys. You never know what's going to happen. You know what I'm saying? They got you on the edge of your feet for every single round. To me, that is an exciting fight. And there were times where I was on the edge of my seat where Shakur would hit him in the body and it looked like it hurt him. And I'm like, oh, Shakur's going to knock him out, but it didn't happen. And there were times where I'm thinking, mate, Artem Harutyunyan is getting some shots in, but it just didn't pan out the way it was supposed to. So overall, man, I got to give it a 6.5. Impact. How does this impact the division or boxing? How do you see that impact going after this fight? So on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you see this fight impacting either the lightweight division or boxing in general? Because remind you, Shakur Stevenson is ranked number 8 on the pound for pound list. So with this fight, does this bump him up a little bit, maybe to 7 or 6? Does it give him a lot more credibility in this division? As far as impact, how would you grade it?
I give it about a 6.5. It might bump him up a little bit just because the guy he fought was in the ring with a guy like Frank Martin and he looked impressive. So he's probably still considered like, a guy that's, could be looked out for. So it might bump him up one spot, but it's not gonna bump him up all the way. So I give it about a 6. What does it do for boxing? It doesn't really do anything for boxing. I mean, for anybody that participates or studies this sport on a regular kind of knew this fight was going to kind of go the way it is. So it wasn't, as far as boxing wise, I say 4. It didn't really have an impact. But as far as does it bump him up, it may bump him up one notch. So with that, I give it a 6. It may bump him up just one notch.
Give it a 7. The reason why I say that is because I do think that after this fight, there are going to be some people looking at Shakur Stevenson in a different light. Again, I feel like this fight kind of proved to people that Shakur Stevenson isn't a runner, at least. I feel like that narrative is going out the window now. Whether people think Shakur Stevenson is still a boring fighter, that's up to them. However, after this fight, you really can't call him a runner. You know what I'm saying? He went into the ring with a guy who is known to bring the fight to a lot of good fighters. He was able to bring the fight to Frank Martin, and this was a guy who could possibly test Shakur Stevenson in different ways. So I don't think we can keep on giving the narrative of Shakur Stevenson as a runner. I think we proved that the Edwin De Los Santos fight was a one-time thing, and the impact for him right there is significant. Now, as far as boxing, they might bump him up one spot, like you said, as far as the pound for pound list. As far as the division, I don't know what this opens up for Shakur Stevenson. Obviously there's a lot of rumors about him leaving Top Rank, which we'll get to later on in this episode. But as far as the actual divisional rankings, I don't know what this could possibly do for him. Maybe it gives him one of these big fights. Obviously, either way you look at it, whether he won this fight the way he did today, or whether he knocked the guy out, or whether it was another snooze fest, I feel like Shakur Stevenson would have still tried to chase one of those big fights. So overall, I think I gotta give it like a 7, man. And then last but not least, stakes. Now, WBC belt is on the line. Obviously, we've talked about that being one of the most important belts in boxing. As far as stakes of this fight, how would you rate that? Scale of 1 to 10, Breezy.
I would have said like below 6, but because the belt was involved, I give it about 7. That's how I try to like do things. Anytime a belt is involved, I always give it to 7 because it's always determining who's next to fight that guy, this guy. So anytime a belt is on the line, I kind of raise it up a little higher. So I give it about a 7.
I give it a 7 too, but just for a little bit of different reasons. The reason why I give it a 7 is because in this specific case, I feel like Shakur Stevenson had to have himself a really good performance, or else he was just. I feel like if Shakur did not have a good performance tonight, if it was very similar to the Edwin de Los Santos, I feel like Shakur's stock drops tremendously. I feel like because he had himself a decent performance, a good performance, I feel like this definitely helps him. If he does leave Top Rank, I feel like he probably gets a bigger offer from either Matchroom or DAZN or PBC, whoever he decides to go to. So I feel like in that specific instance, I think I would give it a 7. Plus the belt's on the line as well. So the WBC belt being on the line, I feel like that's very important. Obviously, the guy he was going up against wasn't a top name. It was Artem Harutyunyan, who's a decent fighter, but he's not an A class fighter. I would say Artem Harutyunyan is probably a B minus fighter. So honestly, I give it a 7. Now, with that being said, Breezy, if we do the math real quick, which I am going to do right now you take all the average total, we add it up, it's 28.25. You divide that by 40, and this fight is ranked 70.6, which puts it around the Canelo Alvarez Jaime Munguia fight. Honestly, Breezy, I feel like that's a good place for it. Or if you were to put it from the scale of 1 to 10, it's 7.06. I feel like that's a good place for it, man. You know what I'm saying? I think that overall, if you compare it to the Jaime Munguia fight, I feel like that is where I would honestly put it in that respectable position. So, with that being said, the only other thing left to ask is obviously, we always ask the question, what's next for Shakur Stevenson? However, the other part to this I have is obviously with the rumors of him leaving Top Rank, do you see him staying with them? Do you see him renewing that contract? Do you see him jumping ship, maybe going to DAZN? Where do you see him going? And if you see him leaving, who do you see him facing next in the upcoming future?
Easy. Winner of Lomachenko and Tank. I mean, you already have belt. What was the issue with you and Haney? Oh, you feel like you wasn't, given a fair deal or fair offer, right? All right, you're at 135. You have a belt, right? All you have to do is fight the other contemporaries, and then boom, undisputed. So that should be his main goal. Headed there already. But do I see him leaving Top Rank? Mm, yes and no. I say yes and no because there's not a lot of guys at Top Rank for you to continue to fight. I mean, you can fight Lomachenko. It's best for you to go ahead and fight Lomachenko while you have the rest of that deal left. Snatch his belt if you can beat him. And then boom, you go shift gears and you go tap in with Al Heyman and them crew. And then you get in there with Tank. You know what I mean? That would be my best deal or bet for him. As far as like what I think he's gonna do, I don't know, man. It's so tricky. These guys are so like all over the place sometimes with what they want to do. We've seen them resign in the past. Um, if anything, I think he'll do something like similar to like Devin Haney. Like he ain't gonna really be like necessarily like promoted to one specific brand. He's gonna kind of be like wherever throwing the best offer, I'll go fight that guy. Woo, woo. I could see him doing something like that. Not completely all the way like Haney, but something similar to that. But easy. Fight Haney. Fight Lomachenko, fight Tank Davis, and snatch those belts up. Easy.
think him leaving Top Rank, I think it depends on who wins between, Gervonta Davis and Lomachenko. I feel like if Lomachenko wins that fight, I feel like he definitely stays with Top Rank and he makes that big fight happen. I feel like if Gervonta Davis wins that fight, then he possibly maybe even goes to PBC, possibly does what Devin Haney does, kind of jump ship a little bit. But Devin Haney's always stayed between Top Rank and DAZN. I don't think I've ever seen Devin Haney fight on Premier Boxing. So the way I kind of look at it is I would love to see him fight Lomachenko. And there's a million fights you can make with Shakur Stevenson. I mean, a lot of people still want to see Shakur versus Devin Haney. Some people want to see Shakur versus Frank Martin. A lot of people want to see Shakur versus Loma. A lot of people want to see Shakur versus Tank. And all those fights are great fights. But I truly feel like here's the way I look at it. If he fights Lomachenko, let's suppose he goes in there and he dominates Lomachenko. I don't need to see him fight Devin Haney because I feel like he'll do the same exact thing because I feel like as Lomachenko and Devin Haney, regardless of which one you want to put above the other, I feel like their styles are not the same, but I feel like their defensive abilities are kind of like, 1A, 1B. So if he goes in there and he defeats Lomachenko and he dominates him, I don't want to see him do the same thing with Devin Haney. And to me, that's just a waste of time. However, if he goes in there with Lomachenko and he has some problems with him, then obviously we would like to see him run it with Devin Haney. I also want to see him run it with Tank because Tank, in my opinion, hasn't fought a pure boxer, and Shakur Stevenson hasn't fought a power puncher like Tank. Edwin De Los Santos had power, but we all know how that fight went. So I feel like that would be a very good test for both of those guys.
Lomachenko or not, I still want to see it because I feel like styles make fights, and I feel like and just to get that clarity, it's like okay, we may feel and believe, but we still want to see it. It's kind of like the thing with Tank and Ryan Garcia. Like, oh, I think Tank gonna win. I think Ryan gonna win. We think, but it's all about seeing it. So even if that is the case, even if he does go in there and dominate Lomachenko, we still want to see it just so we can have that definitive thing, kind of like with Spencer Crawford. Like we still want to see it to be like, okay, all right, we was right.
Obviously, you still want to see him fight the very best. Obviously, you would like to see him kind of rack up that resume and fight guys like Devin Haney and Lomachenko and Tank Davis, no matter what the outcome would be if those guys were to fight each other. However, I truly think that in this specific case, Shakur needs to go after the big fights. And one guy you could have mentioned before he started, effing around and finding out was Ryan Garcia. I feel like him and Ryan Garcia would have been a good fight. However, we all know how that went. Now we're not going to see Ryan Garcia for another year. And on top of that, Ryan Garcia dropped his stock. So that fight's out the window. Now, I say out of all those fights, which one would I like to see? Let's see him fight him and Devin Haney. Now, I know it's kind of a contradiction, but I'd like to see him and Devin Haney, and it works vice versa to what I said. If he goes in there and he beats Devin Haney, I don't need to see him versus Lomachenko. I don't need to see it because, in my opinion, I feel like I already have a really good idea on who wins that. But if he has problems with Devin Haney, I'd like to see, I'd like to see him run it with Lomachenko. But obviously, to me, the final boss would be Gervonta Davis. I feel like that would be the final boss. That would be the last guy that you would go up against to kind of solidify yourself. I feel like right now it's him or Lomachenko as the number one lightweight in the division, and I feel like it might be slightly Gervonta right now. So I would say Gervonta Davis, save him for last, save him because obviously he's the money fight as well. So I'd like to see that be his final opponent. But only time will tell. Obviously, we still got to figure out what he's going to do with this whole top rank situation, everything like that. Top rank's losing a lot of fighters. You know what I'm saying? A lot of fighters are starting to lead top rank. It started with Crawford, and now a lot of people are trying to follow suit. Sabriel Matias was a top rank fighter. Now he's on his own. It just seems like top rank's losing a lot of guys, and I feel like top rank's definitely got to do something about it. And after that Oshaki Foster fight, they're definitely going to lose a lot of guys now. Because, I mean, who would want to sign to that promotion if these are the judges that you're signing to? So overall, Top Rank's got to do better, so it's up to old man Bob to kind of fix that. But with that being said, Breezy, would you like to break down and conclude this episode?
Be live every week, Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, and some Saturdays. Y'all know what the deal is. Be on the lookout because we got Terrence Crawford fight coming in August. Make sure y'all stay posted up with the Instagram, the Twitter, the X, the YouTube, and the podcast. If you don't care to watch the YouTube, you can watch it on the podcast. And y'all know what the deal is. It is the Puncher's Point. And
Also, we're gonna make sure we connect the prediction episode to this as well. So make sure y'all go click the prediction episode. Let us know how we did. Let us know how accurate we were, how inaccurate we were, if you felt like we were inaccurate. But with that being said, Breezy, I kind of cut you off with our closing. So finish it off, man.
Stay on point with the puncher's point.